The aroma of brewing coffee and warm cinnamon rolls wafted through the Sunrise Grill, a compact yet bustling eatery that had, over time, become the cherished hub of their small town, Oak Haven. For the last 4 years, a server named Clara had been an integral part of the grill's welcoming atmosphere. At 32, she was more than just a server. She was the one familiar face regular patrons specifically requested. Clara navigated the tightly packed tables with a grace that resembled a dance, never once fumbling a dish, never confusing an order. She had no need for a notepad. Her memory was impeccable. 2 eggs over medium with extra sausage links for Mr. Davies by the front window, she'd recall. Oatmeal with no sugar and a side of fruit for Mrs. Rodriguez. Black coffee for the delivery drivers, iced herbal tea for the teachers from the nearby elementary school. "Order up!" The chef, a burly man named Sal, would bellow, and Clara would be there in an instant, a gentle smile playing on her lips. She wasn't one for excessive chatter, but her eyes held a genuine kindness. When she inquired about your day, you sensed she truly listened to the reply. The owner, a jovial man everyone affectionately called Chief, often remarked that Clara was worth her weight in platinum. Even when faced with irritable or discourteous customers, like the group of boisterous sales reps who frequented the grill every Thursday and invariably left a chaotic mess, Clara maintained her composure. She would simply tidy up after them without a word of complaint and move seamlessly to the next table. The patrons of the Sunrise Grill knew her as that polite, unassuming waitress who remembered the names of their children and noticed when someone seemed down. What no one knew, not Chief, not the regulars, not even her fellow servers, was Clara's routine after she unfastened her apron each evening. Every night, after her feet throbbed and her back protested from 8 solid hours of carrying laden trays, Clara would ascend the 2 flights of stairs to her modest apartment situated above a quiet old bookstore. The dwelling was unassuming, a single room with a kitchenette tucked into one corner and a bathroom so compact you could barely pivot. Yet it held something precious that made it feel like a sanctuary. In the corner, by its sole window, stood an aged piano. It wasn't a grand instrument. The wood bore scratches in several places, and one leg was marginally shorter than the others, propped up by a stack of outdated magazines. Clara had discovered it 7 years prior at a flea market, acquiring it for a pittance. The elderly woman selling it had glanced at Clara's hands as she lightly tested the keys and had reduced the price further, as if sensing those fingers were destined for a piano. Each night, Clara would shed her practical work shoes, change out of her teal uniform with its faint, stubborn coffee marks, and seat herself at that piano. As her fingers met the keys, a transformation occurred. The weary waitress vanished, replaced by a musician whose very essence flowed through her hands. She played a vast repertoire, classical compositions that narrated stories without words, vibrant jazz melodies that set the heart racing, and melancholic tunes that often brought tears to her own eyes. Some pieces were learned in her youth, others she improvised as she went. The piano was her confidant, her solace, her most steadfast companion. The neighbors never lodged complaints about the music. Occasionally, on balmy evenings when Clara left her window ajar, passers-by would pause, listening, wondering about the origin of such exquisite sounds. No one ever suspected it was the quiet waitress from the grill.
Clara once harbored ambitions. Grand aspirations involving gleaming spotlights and renowned concert halls. Life, however, had charted a different course. But each night, at that piano, those dreams felt tangibly close. For a few treasured hours, she wasn't merely the young woman who refilled coffee mugs and cleared away soiled dishes. She was the individual she had always been meant to be. It happened on the most chaotic Thursday evening the Sunrise Grill had experienced in ages. An unexpected downpour had ushered in a surge of extra customers seeking warm sustenance and refuge from the tempest. Clara had been on her feet for nearly 11 straight hours. Her lower back ached persistently, and a blister was forming on her left instep. Yet she persevered, a smile masking her profound fatigue. Table 7 had been problematic from their arrival. 4 men in well-tailored suits who had evidently commenced their pre-weekend revelries long before entering. They ordered the most elaborate items on the menu, sent back dishes twice with claims of improper cooking, and incessantly demanded beverage refills. Chief had discreetly pulled Clara aside earlier. "You all right managing those gentlemen? I can ask Maria to take over." "I've got it," Clara had reassured him with a weary smile. "They're just unwinding after a tough week." But as the evening progressed, their voices escalated. Their laughter grew sharper, more pointed. Other diners began to cast annoyed glances in their direction. An older couple even requested to be relocated to a table further away. By 8:30 p.m., the men had occupied the table for nearly 4 hours. Clara approached with their bill, hoping they would finally depart, allowing the other customers to enjoy their meals in tranquility. "Gentlemen, whenever you're ready," she said courteously, placing the dark bill folder on the table. The man in the center, the one with the silver tie, who appeared to be the leader, looked up at her, his eyes glassy. He was distinguished-looking in a polished, affluent manner, but a cruel glint touched his smile. "Well, well, the career waitress finally deigns to bring our check," he announced, loud enough for adjacent tables to overhear. Clara's cheeks flushed, but she maintained her professional smile. "Can I get you anything else before you go?" The man surveyed her from head to toe, taking in her teal uniform with the small faded coffee stain near the breast pocket, her sensible shoes, her hair neatly secured in a simple bun. "Tell me something, sweetheart," he drawled, leaning back. "Did you always dream of schlepping plates for a living, or did you just bomb out at everything else first?" His companions roared with laughter, that harsh, demeaning kind people use when belittling someone to inflate their own sense of importance. Clara stood rooted to the spot, her smile still fixed, but now rigid and unnatural. "Leave her be, Richard," one of the other men mumbled, though he was chuckling too. "I'm just curious," the man, Richard, continued, playing to his perceived audience. "I mean, look at her. Must be what, early 30s? Serving burgers and pie? I bet you wish you'd made something more of yourself, eh?" The diner had fallen silent. Everyone was now watching. Clara felt her throat constrict and her eyes begin to sting. "Your total is $192.60, she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady. "The register is up front whenever you're ready." She turned to walk away when the man called after her. "Hey, no offense. We all end up where we belong eventually, right, fellas?" More laughter ensued. Clara kept walking, head held high, but internally something was shattering. Not because his words held truth, she had never felt ashamed of honest labor, but because, for a fleeting, awful moment, his taunts had grazed that hidden sanctuary where her forsaken dreams resided. Chief was at the counter, having witnessed the entire exchange. His face had darkened with fury, and he looked poised to eject the entire table. But Clara gave him a subtle shake of her head as she passed. The diner needed the revenue. "You okay?" he asked quietly, gently taking her arm. "Fine," she whispered, but Chief saw the shimmer of unshed tears in her eyes before she slipped through the swinging doors into the kitchen. In the brief haven of the back room, Clara leaned against the cool stainless steel of the industrial refrigerator, taking deep, steadying breaths. A single tear escaped before she hastily wiped it away. 5 more hours until she could sit at her piano. 5 hours until she could reaffirm to herself who she truly was. A week went by. Clara had almost succeeded in banishing the men in suits, pushing it aside each time it threatened to resurface. The Sunrise Grill had been exceptionally busy with preparations for the forthcoming charity gala, an annual Oak Haven event that attracted the town's most prominent figures. The mayor was expected, along with local business magnates, the school superintendent, and anyone else willing to contribute to the local youth arts program. Chief had been a bundle of nerves all week. "This gala funds programs for dozens of kids every year," he kept repeating as he meticulously reviewed menus and decorations. The Sunrise Grill wasn't opulent, but for this one night, Chief transformed it with crisp white linens, flickering candles, and floral arrangements donated by the florist down the street. The morning of the grand event, Clara arrived early to assist with the setup. She found Chief pacing near the counter, phone clamped to his ear, his face growing progressively redder. "What do you mean you can't make it? The gala starts in 10 hours, he exclaimed into the phone. After listening for a moment, he sighed profoundly. Yeah, I understand. You can't help being sick. Get well, Peterson." He hung up and buried his face in his hands. "What's wrong?" Clara asked, hanging up her jacket. "Peterson, you know, the pianist from the community band. He's down with a terrible cold. Can't even get out of bed." Chief looked up, his eyes clouded with worry. "He plays every year. People expect lovely music during the gala. It's part of why they donate so generously." Clara felt an odd flutter in her chest as she watched Chief pick up the phone again. "I'll try the high school," he muttered. "Maybe the music coordinator." 3 hours later, Chief had contacted everyone he could possibly think of. The high school music coordinator was attending a state conference. The lady who gave piano lessons on Maple Avenue was already engaged for a wedding. The university student who occasionally played at the local coffee house had fractured his wrist in a cycling accident. Clara had remained silent all morning, assisting with table arrangements, polishing silverware, and arranging floral centerpieces. All the while, an internal battle raged within her. The piano in the corner of the diner, a beautiful baby grand that had been donated the previous year, seemed to watch her expectantly. No one knew about her playing, not a single soul in Oak Haven. It had been her secret, her private wellspring of joy and sorrow for so long. If she offered to play tonight, that would irreversibly change. By late afternoon, Chief looked utterly dejected. "We'll just have to use a playlist," he told Maria and the other staff. "I'll find some good classical tracks." Clara stood in the kitchen doorway, clutching a stack of linen napkins, her heart pounding so fiercely she was certain everyone could hear it. Memories cascaded through her mind. Her first recital at age 6, a teacher proclaiming she had a rare gift, the acceptance letter to the conservatory she'd received just before her world unraveled. And then, strangely, she remembered the man with the silver tie, his smug countenance as he mocked her life. "I bet you wish you'd made something more of yourself." Before she could reconsider, Clara set down the napkins and walked over to Chief. "I can play," she said, her voice so soft he almost missed it. Chief looked up, bewildered. "What's that, Clara?" She took a deep breath. "The piano. I can play it for the charity gala." Chief stared at her for a long moment. "You play piano? Since when?" "Since I was 5, she replied, suddenly feeling like that small child again, apprehensive before her first public performance. Chief looked skeptical. Clara had worked for him for 4 years and had never once mentioned being a pianist. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 5 hours until guests were due to arrive. "You sure about this, Clara? This is a significant event for the grill and the town." Clara nodded. "I'm sure." As word circulated among the staff that Clara would be the evening's impromptu entertainment, she noticed Maria whispering to Sal, both looking doubtful. Even more disconcertingly, she spotted 2 regular customers who had witnessed last Thursday's humiliation exchanging knowing glances and barely concealed smirks, clearly anticipating a fiasco. Clara walked over to the piano.
acutely aware of every eye in the room fixed upon her. She sat down on the bench, adjusted its height, and gently lifted the fallboard, running her fingers lightly over the keys without depressing them. It had been nearly a week since she last played, the longest she'd gone in years. Her hands trembled slightly as she rested them in her lap, wondering if she'd just made the most monumental mistake of her life. The charity gala commenced at 7:30 p.m. sharp. The diner was transformed. Candles cast a soft, warm glow on each table, the aroma of Chief's renowned prime rib permeated the air, and volunteers from the local high school, dressed in black and white, served as additional help. The guests arrived in their Sunday best, not ostentatious by metropolitan standards, but special for their small town. The mayor wore his best suit. The bank president's wife donned the diamond pendant she reserved for special occasions. Even the habitually gruff owner of the hardware store had polished his shoes. Clara had changed into a simple navy blue dress she'd purchased years ago for a cousin's christening. Her hair, for once, was down, cascading past her shoulders. She looked different enough that some regular patrons didn't immediately recognize her. As the guests found their tables and settled in, the chatter grew louder. Clara sat perfectly still at the piano, watching, waiting. Chief caught her eye and gave a small, encouraging nod. It was time. Clara placed her hands on the keys. The room was still abuzz with conversation, no one paying much heed to the unassuming waitress at the piano. She took a deep breath and began to play. The initial notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated across the room, delicate yet distinct. A few heads turned, then a few more. Within moments, the talking had ceased completely. Clara's fingers moved across the keys with practiced fluid ease, finding each note perfectly, as if she'd never stopped performing on proper pianos before audiences. The piece began softly, introspectively, then swelled into something more profound and moving. Clara closed her eyes, allowing the music to transport her. She'd forgotten what it felt like, this magic of creating something beautiful that resonated with others. She'd forgotten the thrill of sensing a room full of people holding their breath, ensnared in the spell her fingers could weave. When she opened her eyes midway through the piece, Clara saw Chief standing by the kitchen door, his mouth slightly agape in astonishment. Maria had stopped pouring water, the pitcher suspended in midair. And there, at a table near the center of the room, were the businessmen from last Thursday night. The man with the silver tie, Richard, was staring at her, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth.
Clara didn't falter, didn't hesitate. Her fingers seemed to know their path without conscious thought. Years of dedicated practice had embedded the music into her hands, into her very being. The melody poured out of her, filling every corner of the Sunrise Grill. As the final ethereal notes of Clair de Lune faded, a moment of absolute silence hung in the air. Then, starting with an elderly gentleman near the front, people began to applaud. The applause grew, spreading across the room, until everyone was clapping, some even rising to their feet. The mayor leaned over to Chief and said something that made Chief beam with evident pride. Clara saw Maria whisper to one of the high school volunteers, gesturing towards the piano with wide, incredulous eyes. The businessmen murmured among themselves, glancing at Clara with a newfound, almost sheepish respect. Clara felt her cheeks grow warm. She hadn't anticipated this, hadn't planned for it. She had only intended to help Chief with the charity gala. But now, witnessing the reaction, something long dormant stirred within her. A memory of who she used to be, of who she might still become. Without pausing to overthink, Clara transitioned smoothly into a lively ragtime piece, something more upbeat that matched the revitalized energy in the room. As she played, she saw people smiling, nodding along with the rhythm. The initial formality of the dinner dissolved, replaced by genuine, unadulterated enjoyment. From his table, the man in the silver tie couldn't take his eyes off her. Gone was the smug, condescending expression, replaced by something that looked remarkably like shame, mingled with profound wonder. Clara met his gaze briefly as her fingers danced across the keys, then looked away, losing herself once more in the music that had always been her truest form of expression. For 2 hours, Clara played without a break. Her fingers moved from classical masterpieces to jazz standards, even a few popular contemporary songs that everyone recognized. The charity gala had metamorphosed into something no one had foreseen. Not just another formal event, but a night people would reminisce about for years to come. When Clara finally stopped, her hands weary but her heart fuller than it had been in a very long time, the applause was deafening. Chief rushed over with a glass of water, his face alight with the broadest smile she'd ever seen on him. "Clara," he said, shaking his head in disbelief, "why didn't you ever tell us all this time?" She took a sip of water, suddenly conscious of how many people were watching her, awaiting her answer. The diner had fallen silent again. It never came up," she said softly, though she knew that wasn't the complete truth. "Never came up," Chief chuckled. "You've been hiding a gift like that for 4 years, and you say it never came up." The mayor approached the piano, extending his hand to shake Clara's. "That was extraordinary, young lady, simply extraordinary. Where did you study?" The question struck her like a physical impact. Clara felt her smile falter slightly. I started lessons when I was 6. My teacher said I had a natural aptitude for it." "But where did you train?" the mayor pressed. "A conservatory? University?" Clara looked down at the keys, running her finger lightly over an F sharp without depressing it. "I was accepted to the National Music Institute, full scholarship." A buzz of impressed whispers rippled through the crowd. "But you didn't go?" Chief asked, confusion evident on his face. Clara took a deep breath. She hadn't spoken about this in so long that the words felt alien in her mouth. I was, she smiled sadly. "So I deferred for a year. Thought I'd try again after Mom got better." She paused, recalling those bleak days, the hospital vigils, the escalating medical bills, the way Lily's face had grown gaunt as the months wore on.
But she didn't get better, Clara continued quietly. She fought bravely for nearly 2 years. I took whatever jobs I could find that allowed me to be home most of the time. The piano, it just didn't seem important anymore. "And after?" someone asked gently. Clara looked up to see it was Richard, the man in the silver tie. His face softer now, all arrogance vanished. "After, we had medical debts. Lily needed to finish high school. I picked up more shifts, worked longer hours. I kept telling myself I'd get back to the piano eventually, that I'd try for the institute again." She shrugged. "But years pass, you know. Dreams start to feel like something that happened to someone else." Chief put his hand on her shoulder. "But you kept playing? At home?" Clara nodded. "Every night. It was the one thing I couldn't give up completely. I found an old upright at a flea market. It's not much, but it helps me remember who I was, who I might have been." As the weight of her words settled around the room, a distinguished woman with salt and pepper hair approached the piano. Clara recognized her as Dr. Evans, who headed the community college's arts department. "You still play beautifully," Dr. Evans said. "Better than most formally trained musicians I know. That kind of talent doesn't just disappear." Clara felt a lump forming in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. "Who takes care of your sister now?" Dr. Evans asked. "She's at State University herself, on a pre-med scholarship." Pride crept into Clara's voice. "She's doing incredibly well." Dr. Evans nodded thoughtfully. "And what about you, Clara? What do you want for yourself now?" It was such a simple question, but Clara realized no one had asked her that in years. What did she want? Had she even allowed herself to want anything beyond navigating through each day? Before she could answer, Chief cleared his throat. "Whatever it is, we're going to help you achieve it, aren't we, folks?" A chorus of agreement rose from around the room. Clara looked up, overwhelmed by the kindness in the faces surrounding her. and felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: hope. The next morning, Clara woke to her phone buzzing incessantly. News travels swiftly in small towns, and by breakfast time, everyone in Oakhaven had heard about the waitress who played piano like a seasoned virtuoso. Some called it a hidden talent, others a small miracle. The high school music coordinator left a voicemail asking if Clara would consider speaking to her students about pursuing music. The local church minister wondered if she might contemplate playing for their Sunday gatherings. Chief had already left 3 messages. "The phone's been ringing off the hook," he said in the last one. "People asking if you'll be playing again. Some folks who couldn't make it last night say they'll pay good money to hear you." Clara sat on the edge of her bed, feeling overwhelmed. For years, she'd strived to be inconspicuous, to simply get through each day. Now, suddenly, everyone was looking at her, seeing her. When she arrived at the Sunrise Grill for her afternoon shift, customers broke into applause as she walked through the door. Old Mrs. Davies, who came in every day for coffee and a muffin, hugged her tightly. The postal worker asked for her autograph, only half-jokingly. "There she is," Chief called from behind the counter, "our star." He rushed over and led her to a table where Dr. Evans from the community college sat with a smartly dressed woman Clara didn't recognize. "Clara, this is Professor Anya Sharma from the State University's music faculty. She was at the mayor's table last night." The professor stood and shook her hand. "I've been teaching music for over 25 years," she said, "and I've rarely encountered such innate talent. Dr. Evans and I have been talking all morning." She glanced between them, confused about what. Dr. Evans smiled warmly. "About you, my dear. About possibilities." Over coffee, they explained their idea. The university offered a special scholarship program for non-traditional students with exceptional abilities. It covered full tuition and included a part-time role assisting with beginner classes at the community music outreach program. "You could finish your degree," Professor Sharma said, "and with your talent, performance opportunities would undoubtedly follow." Clara's hands trembled as she held her coffee cup. I don't know what to say. It's been so long." "You haven't lost a thing," Dr. Evans insisted. "That was abundantly clear last night. You just set it aside for a while." Professor Sharma leaned forward. "There's something else. Someone made a rather generous anonymous donation this morning, specifically for you." "For me? Who?" The professor nodded toward a corner table where a familiar face sat alone, pretending to read a newspaper. "Richard, the man with the silver tie. He came to my office first thing this morning," Professor Sharma explained. "Said he wanted to make things right. He's covering all your expenses beyond tuition, books, living costs, whatever you need. Said something about having gravely misjudged you." Clara stared at the businessman, who finally looked up and gave a small, embarrassed nod before quickly returning to his paper. "I don't know if I can accept that," she whispered. "Think of it as someone paying forward the gift you gave everyone last night," Dr. Evans suggested. "Sometimes people need the chance to make amends." Later that afternoon, videos from the charity gala began appearing online. Someone had recorded Clara's performance on their phone, and within hours, tens of thousands of people had watched it. Comments poured in from music lovers, educators, and everyday individuals touched by both her playing and her story, which had somehow disseminated alongside the videos. A local news reporter showed up at the Sunrise Grill with a camera crew, wanting to interview the waitress with the golden touch. People drove in from neighboring counties just to catch a glimpse of her, even though she wasn't playing that day, just serving coffee and cinnamon rolls as always. By evening, Clara's sister Lily had called from her university dorm, laughing in disbelief. "You're internet famous, sis. My roommates think it's the coolest thing ever. They're all sharing your videos." It was all happening so fast. Too fast, perhaps.
Clara stood in the back alley behind the grill during her break, taking deep breaths of the cool evening air, trying to make sense of how her life had been upended in just 24 hours. The back door creaked open, and Chief stepped out, concern etched on his weathered face. "You okay, kiddo?" Clara nodded slowly. "Just trying to wrap my head around it all. It's a lot, maybe too much. I don't know." She looked up at the stars beginning to pepper the darkening sky. "For so long, I thought that part of my life was over. I'd made peace with it. And now, you've got a second chance," Chief said gently. "Those don't come along too often." 9 months passed in a whirlwind of transformation. Autumn deepened into winter, and winter began to yield to the first hints of spring. Clara sat at the window of her new, modest university apartment, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass as she sipped her morning tea. The view was unremarkable, just the campus service road. But the apartment was bright, conveniently located near the music building, and, most importantly, it had ample space for her piano. Not the old, battered upright from her former apartment above the bookstore. That one had been replaced by a beautiful, restored Steinway upright that Professor Sharma had sourced for her from an estate auction. "A proper instrument for a dedicated musician," she'd said with a warm smile when she helped arrange its delivery.
Clara checked the time. 2 hours until her first student of the day arrived. A quiet 9-year-old boy who reminded Clara so much of herself at that age that it sometimes made her heart ache with a bittersweet pang. Teaching beginners at the community music program had turned out to be one of the most unexpected and profound joys of her new life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Chief. "Don't forget Thursday night." Clara smiled. How could she forget? Every Thursday night, she still donned her sunrise grill apron and worked the dinner shift. She had insisted on maintaining that connection to her old life, to the people who had supported her long before anyone knew she could play a single note. Chief had tried to dissuade her at first. "You don't need to wait tables anymore, kiddo," he'd said. "You've got bigger things ahead." But Clara had been firm. "1 shift a week. It keeps me grounded." The truth was, she missed the unassuming simplicity of the grill, the familiar faces, the easy, comforting rhythm of taking orders and engaging in light conversation. It provided a balance to the newness of everything else: her university classes, practice sessions, occasional small recitals, interviews with local publications, and the constant, sometimes overwhelming attention that still made her feel a bit self-conscious. The Sunrise Grill had changed too. Chief had used the surge in business that followed Clara's renowned performance to make some long overdue enhancements. He'd repainted the interior, replaced the wobbly tables, and, most significantly, kept the baby grand piano in the corner as a permanent fixture. Clara's Thursday night sets had become a local institution, with people driving from several counties away just to hear the piano waitress, as the regional paper had affectionately dubbed her. The businessman with the silver tie, Richard, had become one of her most devoted audience members. He always occupied the same corner booth, ordered the same meal, the meatloaf special with extra mashed potatoes, and left an astoundingly generous tip. It had taken Clara many weeks to stop feeling awkward in his presence, but eventually his genuine, persistent remorse had eroded her reservations. Last month, he'd approached her during her break with an unexpected proposition. "I've been thinking," he'd said, shifting uncomfortably, "about people like me. People who, sometimes look down on the person serving their meal or cleaning their office." Clara had listened silently, intrigued. "I want to start a scholarship," he continued, "for service industry workers who have hidden talents, people who deserve a second chance, like the one you got. I'd call it the Sunrise Serenade Grant." He'd smiled, a touch nervously. What do you think? What could she say? The man who had once callously mocked her was now endeavoring to find and support others like her. The world was indeed a strange, unpredictable place, full of unexpected redemptions. Clara glanced at the stack of sheet music on her desk, complex pieces she was mastering for her end-of-semester juried performance. Her fingers were stronger now, her technique more refined under Professor Sharma's meticulous guidance.
But the music itself, the soul of it, that had always resided within her, patiently waiting. Her sister Lily had visited the previous weekend, beaming with pride as she sat in the front row of Clara's first significant solo recital at the university. "Mom would have loved this so much," Lily had whispered as they embraced afterward, tears in both their eyes. Yes, Clara thought, as she finished her tea and moved to the piano for her morning practice, Mom would have loved it. And somewhere, she hoped, her mother was watching, listening. She placed her fingers on the keys, and the melody began to rise, intertwining with the gentle rhythm of the rain outside. So much had changed, but this intimate conversation between her heart and the piano remained constant. It had always been her truest voice, even when it was merely a whisper only she could hear. Now others were listening too. And the young woman who had once been just the waitress was finally, unequivocally, becoming the person she was always meant to be.